The night was completely dark over the dry land of South Texas when a poor man named Miguel Reyes saw something he had not seen on that dirt road in a long time. A car, not just any car. It was one of those big, black vehicles he had only seen once before, in an old magazine someone had left behind at the local store. The car was stopped on the side of the road, covered in red dust, with its headlights still on. Standing next to it, leaning against the door with her arms crossed and a worried look on her face, was a woman. Miguel was 43 years old. He lived alone on a small piece of land that had been his family for years. He worked that land with his hands every single day. He grew corn and beans, kept a few chickens, and got by on very little. His house had 3 small rooms, a wood-burning stove, and a hammock on the porch where he spent many nights looking up at the stars. He had no television, just an old radio that picked up one station. He was not a man who complained. He had learned long ago that complaining does not make the drought shorter or the harvest bigger. That night, coming back from town on his bicycle after dealing with some late bills he had no money to pay, Miguel stopped about 60 feet from the car. He put one foot on the ground and studied the situation the way a man from the country always does, slowly, carefully, without showing fear. Miguel Reyes had built his whole life around routine. Wake up before the sun, drink a strong black coffee, walk out to the fields, come back with a sore back, eat whatever there was, sometimes just cornmeal and an egg, sometimes not even that, then sit on the porch until the dark came in. On weekends, he would ride his bicycle about 12 miles to the nearest town, a small place called Pena Blanca, where he would buy the basics and stop to talk a few minutes with Don Ernesto, who ran the only general store left in the area. It was a small life. Miguel knew that, but it was his, and he had learned to find something good inside it. He had not always been alone. There had been a woman once, and before that, a family, a mother and a father who had both passed. Things go the way they go. That is what he always said. You do not fight every river. Some rivers you just let pass. What kept him going was a land. That piece of dry ground meant everything to him. It was not much to look at. The soil cracked in summer and turned to mud in the short rainy season. But it was his. He had documents with his name on them. Even if the bank had been looking at those documents with hungry eyes for the last few years, Miguel owed money he could not fully pay. That weight sat on his chest every morning when he woke up, but he got up anyway. A man from here does not stay in bed because of worry. Standing there on that dark road with one foot on the ground, Miguel thought about the stories Don Ernesto sometimes told at the store. Stories about broken down cars that turned out to be traps, about people who stopped to help and ended up at the police station without understanding what had happened. Those were not made-up stories. They were real stories from real roads just like this one, far from any town, far from any eyes that could help. He stayed still for about 2 minutes. The woman did not wave at him. She did not call out. She did not ask for anything. She just stood there leaning against that dusty car with an expression he could not fully read from where he was. It was somewhere between pride and desperation, and she seemed to not know which one to go with. That was the thing that made Miguel finally move. Not charity, not habit, not even basic kindness, though he had plenty of that. It was her silence. He recognized that silence. It was the silence of someone who needs help, but has learned that asking is dangerous. He got off the bicycle slowly, let it fall to the side of the road, and walked toward the car with both hands visible, the way a man does when he wants it to be clear he is not carrying anything. The woman watched him come without stepping back, but also without opening up. She was measuring him the same way he was measuring the situation. 2 careful people on a dark road, both trying to figure out if the other one could be trusted. Miguel stopped about 10 feet away from her. "Good evening," he said. "Good evening," she replied. Her voice was steady, but there was a small shake hidden at the bottom of it that she was clearly working to keep under control. He asked if she had car trouble. She said she had run out of gas. She said it the way someone says the most embarrassing thing they have ever done, like it was unbelievable that this had happened to her. "There's no gas station out here," Miguel told her. "The closest one is back in town, about 12 miles away." "I know," she said. She looked down at her phone. "There is no signal out here either." "There's one spot up on the hill," Miguel said, "but at night it is not worth the walk." Silence again. The crickets were loud in the brush. The moon gave just enough light to see where you were stepping, but not much more. The woman looked at the road, at the brush on both sides, at the sky, and then back at him with the look of someone who has done the math and does not like the answer. "Is there anywhere around here?" she asked finally. "There is my house," Miguel said. "It is about 1.5 miles from here. It is not much, but there is water, there is coffee, there is a hammock. In the morning, Roberto passes by with his truck and can give you a ride to town." She went quiet again. She looked at him from head to foot. A thin man, dark from the sun, wearing a worn shirt with a farmer's hands. Miguel let her look. He did not turn away. He did not try to convince her. He did not add more words to the offer he had already made. He just stood there, available, like someone who has made an honest offer and is waiting for an answer without pushing. There is a kind of dignity in that kind of waiting. It is not passive. It is patient. And patience, in a place like South Texas, in a land that teaches you to wait for rain that may never come, is one of the deepest forms of strength a person can have. The woman must have seen something in that stillness, because after a long moment, she gave a small nod. "Okay," she said. Miguel picked up his bicycle. The woman reached inside the car and pulled out a small bag. She locked the doors with a small electronic beep that sounded very strange in all that country silence, like something from another world. And then she walked next to him on that dirt road for 1.5 miles without saying a single word. Miguel did not say anything either. He just pushed his bicycle slowly, giving her whatever pace felt right to her, not rushing her and not slowing her down on purpose. The sky above them was full of stars the way it always is out in the country, where there are no city lights to wash them out. Under that sky, those two strangers walked side by side, one of them thinking about what she had walked into, and the other thinking about what he had just decided to do. Miguel's house was exactly what it was. 3 rooms, bare brick walls, a clay tile roof, a small porch with 2 old wooden chairs, and the hammock. Inside, there was a single bed, a table with 2 chairs, a wood-burning stove, a shelf with a few basic supplies, and a small bookcase with 5 old books he had been given by a schoolteacher years ago. There were no decorations, no extra things, nothing that was not needed, but it was clean. Everything was in order, and anyone who has ever walked into a poor man's home that is kept clean, and in order knows what that says about the person who lives there. It says more than words can. "Come in and sit down," Miguel said, pulling out one of the chairs at the table. She sat. She looked around without hiding the fact that she was looking, but it was not a judgmental look. It was the look of someone trying to understand something. Miguel went to the stove, lit the fire with a piece of dry wood, put the kettle on, and reached for the coffee jar. "Do you want coffee?" he asked. "I have cornmeal too, if you are hungry." "Not much else, I am afraid." "Coffee is fine," she said. He made the coffee the old way, the way his mother had taught him, letting the dark liquid fall slowly through a cloth strainer into a tin cup. He brought it to her with a small piece of raw brown sugar on the side. She looked at that piece of sugar with an expression he could not quite read. Surprise, maybe, or something that went deeper than surprise. They drank their coffee in silence. Outside, the land made its nighttime sounds. Crickets, a frog somewhere far off, the wind moving through the dry brush with a low whistle. "Do you live here alone?" she asked after a while. "I do," Miguel said. "Always have." "No family?" "No," he said. He said it without sadness, just as a fact. "I had family once, but things go the way they go." She held her cup in both hands and looked at the coffee. For a moment, Miguel had the strange feeling that this woman was carrying a weight that had nothing to do with the car broken down on the road. It was an older weight, the kind that does not come from one bad day, but from years of something that never got resolved. This happened once before. Miguel said suddenly, almost without meaning to. She looked up. "What did?" "Someone appearing lost on this road." He looked toward the window and the dark brush outside. "A few years back, it was a man. He was on foot. I stopped for him too." She waited quietly, but Miguel did not continue. He just shook his head slightly, the way a person does when they push a heavy thought back into its place, and then got up to hang the hammock on the porch. "You can sleep in the bed," he told her. "I will be fine out here in the hammock." "You do not have to," she started to say. "You can," he said calmly, without sharpness. "That is how it is here." She did not argue. She accepted. While she settled into the room, Miguel laid down in a hammock on the porch and looked up at the sky. The stars were thick the way they always are when there are no clouds and no city lights for miles. He thought about the man on the road, about what that man had said on that night, so many years ago, about the small wooden box he kept in the back of the closet, inside of which there was something he had never been able to return, because he had never known who to return it to. He had kept it for years, not because he planned to keep it forever, but because throwing away had always felt wrong, like something that belonged to someone, even if he did not know who that someone was. The night passed quietly. The land breathed around him in that way it does when nothing is wrong and nothing is happening, just a slow turning of the world under a full sky. Miguel woke when the rooster crowed at 5 in the morning, the way it always did. He lay still for a few seconds, looking at the tile roof of the porch, and for just a moment he forgot there was someone sleeping inside the house. Then he heard it, a soft sound of breathing coming from the room, a sound he had not heard inside that house in a very long time. He got up slowly, folded the hammock blanket with the care of someone who does not want to wake anyone, and went to make coffee. He lit the stove in the morning silence and started the kettle. He cut a piece of cheese he had kept wrapped in a damp cloth on the shelf, arranged everything on the table, and then went to the porch to wait for the day to fully arrive. That was when he heard it. First, it was a low sound in the distance that he thought might be thunder, but the sky was completely clear. No clouds, no different kind of wind, nothing that explained that growing noise coming from the direction of the dirt road. Miguel narrowed his eyes toward the curve at the end of the sight line and stood very still. The dust came first, a red cloud rising slowly on the horizon, too thick and too wide to be a single car. Then came the sound, engine on top of engine, the deep rumble of many heavy things moving at the same time. And then, turning the curve with a kind of slow ceremony, the cars began to appear, one after another, big, black, shiny, dark windows, wide tires that threw up the red dust of the road like the road was too small for them. Miguel counted until he stopped counting. There were many of them, so many that they filled the entire dirt road in front of his house from one end to the other, like they had been waiting just around that curve for a signal to move. He stood on the porch with his arms at his sides, not understanding any of what he was seeing. The car doors opened one by one, and people stepped out who had absolutely nothing to do with that road, that sun, or that land. Men in dark suits with sunglasses and small earpieces. Women in business clothes carrying notebooks. A man with a camera on his shoulder. Another with a long microphone. And then, over the ridge behind the house, a helicopter appeared and began circling low, filling everything with the sound of its blades and a storm of wind and dust. "What on earth is this?" Miguel said quietly to himself. Two of the men in suits came forward toward the porch. They walked the way people walk who are used to arriving anywhere and already feeling like they belong there. "Good morning," said the one in front, in a voice that had nothing genuinely warm about it. "Are you the resident of this property?" "I am," Miguel answered, not moving from his spot. "Is Miss Victoria Falcón here?" Miguel opened his mouth to respond, and at that exact moment, he heard the old wooden door of the room creak open behind him. She came out barefoot, wearing the same clothes from the night before, a little wrinkled, her dark hair loose, her face carrying the look of someone who had just woken up. But when the two security men saw her, something changed in the whole feeling of the scene. They straightened up, they stepped back half a step, and what had looked like a small invasion turned into something else entirely. It turned into recognition. "Dr. Victoria," the one in front said, with a relief he could barely hide underneath his professional voice. "Mr. Marcos sent the whole team. We have been looking for you since last night." She ran a hand through her hair, took a slow breath, and nodded. "I know," she said. "I am fine." Miguel stood between the two of them, looking from one side to the other, trying to put together the pieces of the situation that was assembling itself much too fast for him to follow at a comfortable pace. A camera turned toward him. A reporter he had not noticed before appeared from the side with a microphone. "Sir, can you confirm that you sheltered businesswoman Victoria Falcón during the night?" Miguel did not answer. He took a step back toward the porch, turned his back to the reporter, and looked at her. "You are famous?" he said. It was not really a question. Victoria looked back at him with an expression that held both embarrassment and apology at the same time. "I am," she answered quietly. "Famous how?" "My father founded the Falcon Group." She paused. "I am the president." Miguel did not know exactly what the Falcon Group was. But given the size of the circus now standing in front of his little house on a dirt road in South Texas, he figured it was big, very big. The kind of big that makes 100 luxury cars move down a rural road without anyone finding that strange. He stayed quiet for a time that was long enough to be uncomfortable. Then he went inside, picked up the coffee he had made earlier, brought a cup to her without saying a word, and sat down in the porch chair facing all of that movement outside, with the steady expression of a man who has seen strange things before and has learned that losing himself in confusion does not help anything. Victoria drank her coffee standing at the edge of the porch, her back to the security team. She looked at Miguel with a look that carried more than obligation. "Thank you," she said. "For real. You do not need to thank me," he replied. It was the right thing to do. She stayed a little longer. Then she walked down the porch steps, went to the lead car, got in, and the whole long procession left the way it had come, slowly, raising dust, filling, and then emptying that dirt road in front of his house. Something Miguel spent about 20 minutes convincing himself had actually happened. When the last cloud of red dust settled back to ground, the road was empty again. The rooster crowed a second time. The sun was already high. Miguel stood on the porch holding his aluminum coffee cup and looked at the empty road. Try to understand exactly what just passed through his life during that night. Welcome to Addictive Stories, where life surprises you in ways no one could plan. 3 days later, she came back. No luxury cars, no security team. She drove a smaller, quiet car, driving herself. She parked in front of the house and found Miguel fixing a barbed wire fence in the back of the yard. "You again," he said without looking up right away. "Me again," she confirmed. He kept twisting the wire for a few seconds, then set down the pliers, wiped his hands on his pants, and turned to face her. She had an envelope in her hand. "I want to give you this," she said. "I do not need it," Miguel said. "I told you I do not need it." His voice was not angry. It was firm in the way that honest firmness sounds. Without anger, without wounded pride, just with conviction. "I did not do it for money. If it had been for money, I would not have done it, because money is something I do not have and never have had, and I am still alive because of it." She stood holding the envelope for a moment. Then she put it back in her pocket. "Then let me invite you to lunch," she said. "In the city, just that. No envelope, no anything, just lunch." Miguel looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the fence that still needed fixing. Then he looked at the sky. "Okay," he said. The city was another world. Miguel knew that before he even got there. But knowing something and feeling it in your body are two very different things. The restaurant she chose was on a high floor of a glass building with a view of a wide avenue he had never seen in real life. The napkins were made of cloth and folded into the shape of a flower. There were more forks on the table than he knew what to do with. The menu had no prices on it. The kind of menu that does not need prices because everyone who goes there already knows they can afford whatever is written inside. Miguel arrived wearing his good long-sleeve plaid shirt, his press work pants, and his leather shoes that squeaked a little but were clean. And still, even with all that care, he felt like he was standing on the outside of something he could not name. The looks started right away. Discreet looks. The kind that pretend not to be looking but are. The host who seated them was polite. But it was a different kind of polite, the kind that smiles at everyone while measuring everything at the same time. A couple at a nearby table whispered something and laughed quietly. A waiter passed close to Miguel twice without asking if he needed anything, but stopped to ask Victoria on that same pass. Victoria did not pretend she was not seeing any of it. She saw every look, and each one made her go a little quieter, as if each sideways glance he received was landing somewhere inside her. By dessert, A man she knew stopped at their table. An executive, expensive jacket. The kind of face that always looks like it is in a meeting. He greeted Victoria and then gave Miguel a look of the kind you give to something that seems out of place in a neat room. New social project? The man asked her with a smile that was not a smile. Miguel heard it. Victoria saw him hear it. The silence between the three of them lasted about 2 seconds, but felt much longer. "He is my guest," she said with a coldness that closed the conversation. The man walked away. She looked at Miguel. "Sorry," she started. "You do not need to apologize for something you did not do," he said. He finished his coffee, stayed a little longer out of good manners. But when they left the restaurant and she asked if he wanted to see her apartment, explore the city, stay another day, he looked out at the noisy avenue and went quiet. "I do not think so," Miguel said finally. "Why not?" "Because this place is not mine." He did not say it with sadness. He said it with the quiet clarity of someone who knows his own size and is not ashamed of it. "You were fine in my place. I do not fit in yours. That is not a fault of either of us. It is just how it is." She stood on the sidewalk looking at him, but before she could answer, he had already called a cab. When she returned to the hotel that evening, the room she had reserved for him was untouched. The bed had not been slept in. On the pillow, there was a small note written in the handwriting of someone who learned to write, but does not write often. "Thank you for the lunch. Take care of yourself." Nothing more. She could have let it go. That much she knew. She had no obligation to return. He had left on his own. He had left the note. He had closed the matter the way he closed everything, clean and without loose ends. Any reasonable person would have understood the message and moved on. Victoria Falcón had never been very good at moving on. She went back to the ranch on a Thursday morning, alone, in the same quiet car, without telling anyone she was going. She took the dirt road, knowing away from memory now, the curb past the dry pond, the crooked sign pointing to a district that no longer exists, the rough stretch of rock that shakes the car in a way that feels personal. She parked in front of Miguel's house a little before 10 in the morning. He was in the field. She walked out to find him, crossing the yard, passing the chicken coop where the rooster looked at her with suspicion, opening the wooden gate at the back, and walking to the half-grown corn until she found him crouched in the dirt, pulling weeds by hand. He heard the footsteps, looked up, stayed still for a moment looking at her, and then went back to pulling weeds. "I knew you would come back," he said. "You did? You have the face of someone who does not let a matter go until it is properly closed." She stood at the edge of the corn rows looking at him work. Then she walked closer and crouched down in the warm dirt beside him. "Can I help?" Miguel looked at her hands. Careful hands, clean nails, clothes that were clearly not made for field work. He felt like smiling, but he did not. "You can," he said. They stayed there for a good while, pulling weeds in silence. The sun climbing slowly, the birds making noise in the branches of the old mesquite tree in the corner of the field. It was not a bad silence. It was the kind of silence that does not need to be filled because it is already full of something neither of them could quite name. When the sun got too heavy, he stood up, knocked the dirt from his hands, and nodded toward the house. "Let's go back." She followed. On the porch, with 2 glasses of cool water between them, it was she who began. "Why did you leave like that without saying anything?" "I do not need it," Miguel said. "I told you I do not need it." His voice was not angry. It was firm in the way that honest firmness sounds. Without anger, without wounded pride, just with conviction. "I did not do it for money. If it had been for money, I would not have done it, because money is something I do not have and never have had, and I am still alive because of it." She stood holding the envelope for a moment. Then she put it back in her pocket. "Then let me invite you to lunch," she said. "In the city, just that. No envelope, no anything, just lunch." Miguel looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the fence that still needed fixing. Then he looked at the sky. "Okay," he said. The city was another world. Miguel knew that before he even got there. But knowing something and feeling it in your body are 2 very different things. The restaurant she chose was on a high floor of a glass building with a view of a wide avenue he had never seen in real life. The napkins were made of cloth and folded into the shape of a flower. There were more forks on the table than he knew what to do with. The menu had no prices on it. The kind of menu that does not need prices because everyone who goes there already knows they can afford whatever's written inside. Miguel arrived wearing his good long-sleeve plaid shirt, his pressed work pants, and his leather shoes that squeaked a little but were clean. And still, even with all that care, he felt like he was standing on the outside of something he could not name. The looks started right away. Discreet looks. The kind that pretend not to be looking but are. The host who seated them was polite. But it was a different kind of polite, the kind that smiles at everyone while measuring everything at the same time. A couple at a nearby table whispered something and laughed quietly. A waiter passed close to Miguel twice without asking if he needed anything, but stopped to ask Victoria on that same pass. Victoria did not pretend she was not seeing any of it. She saw every look, and each one made her go a little quieter, as if each sideways glance he received was landing somewhere inside her. By dessert, a man she knew stopped at their table. An executive, expensive jacket, the kind of face that always looks like it is in a meeting. He greeted Victoria and then gave Miguel a look of the kind you give to something that seems out of place in a neat room. New social project? The man asked her with a smile that was not a smile. Miguel heard it. Victoria saw him hear it. The silence between the three of them lasted about 2 seconds, but felt much longer. "He is my guest," she said with a coldness that closed the conversation. The man walked away. She looked at Miguel. "Sorry," she started. "You do not need to apologize for something you did not do," he said. He finished his coffee, stayed a little longer out of good manners. But when they left the restaurant and she asked if he wanted to see her apartment, explore the city, stay another day, he looked out at the noisy avenue and went quiet. "I do not think so," Miguel said finally. "Why not?" "Because this place is not mine." He did not say it with sadness. He said it with the quiet clarity of someone who knows his own size and is not ashamed of it. "You were fine in my place. I do not fit in yours. That is not a fault of either of us. It is just how it is." She stood on the sidewalk looking at him, but before she could answer, he had already called a cab. When she returned to the hotel that evening, the room she had reserved for him was untouched. The bed had not been slept in. On the pillow, there was a small note written in the handwriting of someone who learned to write, but does not write often. "Thank you for the lunch. Take care of yourself." Nothing more. She could have let it go. That much she knew. She had no obligation to return. He had left on his own. He had left the note. He had closed the matter the way he closed everything, clean and without loose ends. Any reasonable person would have understood the message and moved on. Victoria Falcón had never been very good at moving on. She went back to the ranch on a Thursday morning, alone, in the same quiet car, without telling anyone she was going. She took the dirt road, knowing away from memory now, the curb past the dry pond, the crooked sign pointing to a district that no longer exists, the rough stretch of rock that shakes the car in a way that feels personal. She parked in front of Miguel's house a little before 10 in the morning. He was in the field. She walked out to find him, crossing the yard, passing the chicken coop where the rooster looked at her with suspicion, opening the wooden gate at the back, and walking to the half-grown corn until she found him crouched in the dirt, pulling weeds by hand. He heard the footsteps, looked up, stayed still for a moment looking at her, and then went back to pulling weeds. "I knew you would come back," he said. "You did? You have the face of someone who does not let a matter go until it is properly closed." She stood at the edge of the corn rows looking at him work. Then she walked closer and crouched down in the warm dirt beside him. "Can I help?" Miguel looked at her hands. Careful hands, clean nails, clothes that were clearly not made for field work. He felt like smiling, but he did not. "You can," he said. They stayed there for a good while, pulling weeds in silence. The sun climbing slowly, the birds making noise in the branches of the old mesquite tree in the corner of the field. It was not a bad silence. It was the kind of silence that does not need to be filled because it is already full of something neither of them could quite name. When the sun got too heavy, he stood up, knocked the dirt from his hands, and nodded toward the house. "Let's go back." She followed. On the porch, with 2 glasses of cool water between them, it was she who began. "Why did you leave like that without saying anything?" The sun was directly overhead now. The dry brush was quiet the way it gets when the heat really presses down, as if even the birds had gone to find shade somewhere. And there on the porch of that three-room house, two people who were no longer strangers sat in silence with an old medal between them and 12 years of story that neither of them had asked to carry, but that had somehow carried itself all the way to them. "You kept this for 12 years?" She said at last. "I kept it without knowing whose it was," Miguel said, without knowing. He lifted one shoulder slightly, but it felt wrong to throw it away. It felt like it was going to belong to someone someday. She closed the medal inside her fist and looked at him with a look that was no longer gratitude, no longer surprise, no longer anything with an easy name. It was a look of someone who has just understood that the world sometimes weaves a story so strange it sounds made up, but it is exactly because it sounds made up that you know it is true. "I thought I was only helping a lost man," Miguel said quietly, almost himself. "I did not know I was keeping a piece of your story." She did not leave that day. She stayed until the sun started to go down. And when Miguel said he was going to make a simple dinner, rice and beans, and whatever else there was, she did not get up to leave. She stayed sitting in the kitchen chair in silence while he cooked, the way you sit in the silence of a house that no longer feels strange to you. They ate without ceremony. Beans in a deep bowl, white rice, a little dried cheese on the side. She ate everything. She did not say it was good or that it was simple. She just ate, and that said more than any comment could have. When the night fully closed in, she stood up. "I have to go," she said. "I know," he replied. She stood in the doorway for a moment with the medal still closed in her fist. "Can I come back?" Miguel sat looking at her for a while. He did not pretend the question was simple, because it was not. He did not pretend the answer was easy, because it was not either. Outside, the land made its usual sounds. The cricket, the frog, the low wind through the dry brush. "You can," he said finally, and she left. She came back 1 week later, then after 15 days, then every week. She did not come with her hands empty, but she did not come showing off either. She came with food, with a tool he had mentioned in passing was wearing out, with a book after he had mentioned the 5 old ones on the shelf. Small things, but the kind of small things that show someone was listening when you spoke. He received everything without making a big deal of it. He did not refuse right away. He did not accept with too much gratitude. He just let the things become part of the life he already had, the way the land in South Texas takes in rain when it finally comes, without noise, but using every drop. On one of those visits, she arrived with a man carrying a briefcase. Miguel's face closed up immediately. "What is this?" he asked. "He is a lawyer," she said calmly. "I came to look at the situation with your land and the bank. I did not ask for that." "I know you did not ask." She held his gaze without flinching. "But I know the land is in danger, and I know you are not going to ask for help. Not even the bank shows up tomorrow with a court order. So I decided to ask before doing anything." She paused. "May I?" Miguel looked at the lawyer, then at her, then at the packed dirt floor of the porch. "How does it work?" She explained it. The lawyer explained it better. It was not charity. It was debt restructuring, something any person with access to a good attorney could try. Something Miguel had never had access to because access costs money, and money was the one thing he had always been short of. He stayed quiet for a long while after both of them finished speaking. Then he got up and walked to the edge of the porch and looked at the piece of land that was his in name and that he wanted to remain his in reality. The late afternoon sun was throwing an orange light over the dry brush that made everything look painted. "You can try," he said without turning around. She did not celebrate. She did not smile too much. She just nodded at the lawyer and stayed quiet beside Miguel, looking at the same horizon. And it was in that moment, in that silence at the end of the day, with the two of them side by side, looking at the same ground, that something changed between them. The romance did not arrive all at once. It could not have. They were two people who had each learned to be careful, each in their own way and for their own reasons. It arrived the way rain arrives in South Texas, when it finally decides to stay, slowly, without a clear warning. But when you look at the ground after a while, everything is already different. It arrived in a look that lasted 1 second longer than it needed to last, in a hand that brushed the other person's shoulder when passing close by. The kind of touch that was not planned but was not accidental either. It arrived in a real laugh that came out of Miguel on a Saturday afternoon, a genuine laugh from deep down that he himself seemed surprised to be giving, while she tried and failed badly at hanging a hammock by herself on the porch. You have never hung a hammock in your life, have you? Never needed to, she admitted, with the hammock tangled around her neck in a way that made no sense at all. He got up, went to her, untied the wrong knot with his experienced hands, and hung the hammock in the right spot in less than 30 seconds. He stood for a moment with both ends of it in his hands before tying them off, and she was close enough that the silence between them had a different weight than usual. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You are welcome," he answered, and his voice came out lower than he intended. Neither of them moved for a full second that lasted longer than a second. Then he tied the hammock, took a step back, and went to make coffee with the forced calm of a man pretending his heart had not just sped up. She lay in the hammock and looked at the tile ceiling of the porch with a smile that no one else needed to see. It was not easy. Nothing worth having usually is. Miguel held back his own feelings for weeks, the way a man from the country holds back from things that seem too large, with silence and with work, and with keeping his eyes on what is in front of him and not on what is in his chest. He was afraid of the obvious. They were different worlds, different lives. People too different for any of it to make sense on any calendar other than the one that lives in a person's imagination. And she had her own fears. She had spent her whole life making big decisions in meeting rooms with spreadsheets and strategies and legal support behind every move. This had none of that. This was a 43-year-old man with working hands and a directness so honest it sometimes hurt, who lived in a 3-room house in the middle of the South Texas brush, and who was more whole than anyone she had met in all her years in the business world. And that was exactly what frightened her, because whole is rare, and when you find it, you do not quite know what to do with it. The conversation that needed to happen happened on a night with a full moon, both of them on the old wooden chairs on the porch, the silver horizon of dry brush stretching out in front of them. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I know," he answered. She looked at him. "You know what? I know what you're going to say." He kept his eyes on the horizon, and I would need to say the same thing. Silence. An owl called somewhere far away. "Just once." "This will not be easy," she said. "I never thought it would be. Our lives are very different." "They are. You will not want to move to the city, and I cannot stay here full time." "I know. So then, how, Victoria?" He turned his face toward her, and there was in his eyes that calm she had learned to recognize. Not the calm of someone who does not feel, but the calm of someone who feels deeply and has learned not to let the feeling run ahead of his judgment. "You crossed the whole world to end up on my road," he said. "I kept an object of your father's for 12 years without knowing it was your father's." He paused. "I do not fully understand what that means, but I know that something that arrives the way this arrived is not something I throw away without trying." She looked at him for a long time. "And how do we try?" He looked back at the horizon, the way we've been doing it, slowly, with honesty, without one person making the other stop being who they are. In the months that followed, that was exactly what happened. She did not try to change the house. She did not send a decorator. She did not arrive with new furniture. What she did was handle the land situation quietly, through the legal path, without making noise about it, in a way that left the debt at a size Miguel could manage with what his land produced without needing favors, without needing charity. She understood that this was the only kind of help he would truly accept, the kind that kept his dignity alongside his land. He learned to receive that without feeling smaller for it. It took longer than either of them expected, but it arrived. She began going to the ranch every 2 weeks. She would stay a few days and help in the fields the way someone helps who does not know much but is willing to learn. She learned to hang the hammock. She learned to make coffee through the cloth strainer. She learned to be quiet in the silence of late afternoon without feeling the need to fill it. He went to her city twice, not to expensive restaurants with no prices on the menu, but to small places she chose with him in mind, places without ceremony. He was uncomfortable both times in the same way. But he went, and she stayed by his side, without being embarrassed, and without needing to explain anything to anyone. And that was different from the first time in a way that mattered. The Medal of St. George stayed with her. But before she put it away for good, she took it to a craftsman in the city and had it put on a new cord. Stronger, longer. She wore it around her neck, sometimes under her shirt, in the place where the chest keeps the things it does not need to show to everyone. The last scene between them in that season happened on an early winter afternoon, which in South Texas is when the rain starts to threaten to return, when the air changes its smell, and the land seems to wake from a long sleep. She was on the porch. He came in from the fields with his hands dirty with good dirt, and his face carrying the good kind of tired, the tiredness of someone who has truly worked and is satisfied with that. He sat in the chair beside her. They stayed in silence for a while, watching the sky begin to gather clouds on the horizon. "Do you think it will rain?" she asked. "It will rain," he answered with the certainty of someone who has been reading the sky their whole life. Tonight, she looked at the horizon quietly. "Miguel," she said after a moment. She paused. "Thank you." She did not specify for what. She did not need to. He was quiet for a few seconds. "Then I should thank you," he said. "For what?" "Because you appeared on that road," he said. He said it with the simplicity of someone stating the most direct truth they have. "And why did you stop for me?" she asked. She pulled the medal out from under her shirt and held it in her open hand, looking at St. George engraved in the metal, darkened by time. 12 years kept in a little wooden box, she said quietly. 12 years waiting to come home. "My father spent his last peaceful night on this porch," she said softly. "He did," Miguel answered. "I think he knew what he was doing." She looked up. "What do you mean? He knew what he was leaving here?" she asked. "That he was leaving it here with you?" Far out on the horizon, a bolt of lightning opened the sky without making sound yet. The rain was coming the way good things come in South Texas, announcing itself, but not hurrying. Miguel placed his hand over hers slowly, without forcing anything. She did not pull away, and the two of them stayed like that, his hand over hers, the metal between her fingers, the rain coming slowly across the horizon of dry brush. The afternoon died in the beautiful way that only the South Texas brush knows how to do. Sometimes life comes back down the same road just to finish a conversation that was left open. Miguel Reyes had stopped for a stranger on a dark dirt road 12 years ago, not knowing he was holding on to a piece of someone's story. He had stopped again the second time, not knowing that the road would bring him something he had stopped expecting. And Victoria Falcón had run out of gas on a road with no signal and no gas station, not knowing that the place she would end up was a place where her father had once found a few hours of peace before disappearing from her life. Some things cannot be planned. Some things cannot be explained. They can only be lived slowly, with honesty, without pretending to understand all of it before it is ready to be understood. After that afternoon on the porch, the rain came exactly when Miguel said it would. That night, heavy drops fell on the tile roof of the three-room house, and the land that had been cracked and dry soaked it in without wasting a single drop. Victoria stayed that night, not because she had planned to, because when the rain started and Miguel said simply, "You cannot drive in this," and went to put a pot of beans on the stove, she sat down at the kitchen table and realized she did not want to leave. They did not make promises they could not keep. They did not talk about the future as if it were a problem to solve. They let it be what it was, which was two people who had arrived at each other from very far away, across 12 years in a dirt road and an old metal, and a father who had left without saying goodbye. Cicero had once believed that a man like him, with land that was almost lost in hands worn from years of hard work, did not have room in his life for anything that felt that large. He had been wrong. Not everything large has to crush you. Some things that are large hold you up instead. And Victoria, who had spent years running a company her father had built, who had made decisions in glass towers while carrying the weight of his disappearance in silence, had found something she had not put on any spreadsheet or any strategy document. She had found a person who was whole, and she had decided that whole was worth the drive down a long dirt road. Every single time.